When Jesus was here on earth, his disciples asked him, "When will the end times come?" Do you know what his answer was? Hi, I'm Rob Rash, and we're continuing our series on Bible prophecy that's not yet been fulfilled. Well, when Jesus was here on earth, his disciples asked him directly, here in Matthew 24:3, "What will be the sign of the end? Your coming, the final end days. Tell us, Jesus, when will that come?" And he gave them a direct answer. And so let's go into that answer because it's fascinating for our future. Well, the first thing he told them is there are going to be a lot of things that happen before that will look like the end, but they're not the end. And he described them as birth pains. So think about contractions. As the birth of a baby grows nearer and nearer, they'll become more pronounced and more painful. And these birth pains he described as terrible events, earthquakes, famines, wars, rumors of wars. He said all these things will happen in the end times. He said there will be tremendous deception of the people, meaning false religions and false teaching. Wow, do we see that like crazy? He said there would be persecution of his disciples. They would be harassed and even put to death for their faith in him. We've seen that. But he said, even with all those things, he said, those are not the end. But then he tells us exactly what to look for. And this, I'm going to start in Matthew 24:15, and I'll put it up for you. And here's what he does. He points us, he actually partially quotes a prophecy out of Daniel 9:27. So here's what Jesus said in Matthew. Now let me put up the quote that he has for you in Daniel 9:27. And let's break this down, because this Daniel passage, Jesus is telling us, is the sign that I'm coming very, very soon. So let's understand what he's telling us. All right, first of all, it says, let me read it to you. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. At the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. All right, man, there's a ton of stuff there. So let's go into it. So first of all, he says he will confirm a covenant. We'll get to the he in a minute. He will confirm a covenant. Confirm a covenant means there's a treaty coming, some type of very binding, formalized agreement, probably some type of very public peace treaty is what we should be looking for. This will not be a secret. This will be a very public event. He will confirm a treaty for 1/7. 7 is the length of time. It'll be 7 years in length. Peace treaty, 7 years in length. Then it says, in the middle of the 7, this person will put an end to sacrifice in the temple. That phrase, confirm a covenant, in Hebrew, that's really a very strong statement, meaning this person, this he, will be leading this process. He'll almost, in a way, be very forceful in making sure that this covenant comes around and that this covenant happens. So apparently he is leading this process to make it happen. How do we know who he is? Well, as we keep reading there in Daniel, we learn really quickly by his actions. And here's what his actions are. It says that he will put an end to sacrifice in the temple. What that means is there will need to be a temple, which we don't have yet. But at the temple, this is on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, a Jewish temple of worship that doesn't exist today. But he will enter this temple, and not just enter the temple, but he'll enter what's called the Holy of Holies. This is the inner sanctum of the temple where no person is allowed, with one exception. On the day of sacrifice, Yom Kippur, which is traditional for the Jewish people, still to this day, this is the day of sacrifice that's annual, it's sacred, it's their highest holy day. On this day, the high priest would traditionally enter the temple on that day and make a blood sacrifice on the altar of God for the sins of the people. And their sins would be forgiven. God would forgive them because of this substitute, this blood that was offered. The Antichrist will enter on that day and proclaim himself to be God, and he'll put an end to all the sacrifices. Why is he doing this? What's his purpose in all this? Well, this is becoming pretty obvious who this person is. This is Satan in the flesh. This is the Antichrist. This is Satan's attempt to look like Jesus. And what does he want to do? He wants to deceive the whole world into following and worshiping him. He is, it says in the Bible, the father of lies. He is the great liar. This toll treaty was one big lie to get the world to follow him. And now he enters God's temple to desecrate it. That's what's meant by the term abomination of desolation. He desolates the temple. In other words, he pollutes it. And something interesting happens when that happens. We'll go more into it in future talks. God leaves the temple. So this is the big lie. So let's talk about real quickly the third temple. As of today, there is no temple in Jerusalem. Now, today, meaning I'm doing this in late 2025, early 26, by the time it's probably out there, there is no temple in Jerusalem. What's there today is what you see are a couple of Islamic structures, and here's a picture of the Dome on the Rock. You've probably seen this before. It sits in this Temple Mount area. It's a few acres. You've probably seen it. In the middle is what's this Islamic. It's a house of worship for them. And off to the side, which you don't see, there's an Islamic mosque, all on the Temple Mount. Well, they're in the way of the construction of the third temple. So as of right now, it's impossible to construct the third temple. In other words, it will take an act of God for the conditions to be right for the third temple to be constructed. Because if the Israeli people attempted to build that temple on the Temple Mount, I kid you not, it would start World War III. You would have millions of Muslim people descending on Jerusalem and on the temple to defend their structures. This cannot happen. Here's what's really fascinating about the timing of this particular prophecy. In order to get here, in order to have the conditions right for a peace treaty and the construction of the temple, Ezekiel 38 and 39 need to happen. Israel's enemies need to be completely vanquished, probably in this whole process, again, because of the destructive nature of what God does in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Probably these structures are destroyed in that process. They're just buildings. They're not hard to remove. They'll be destroyed in the process. There'll be now a peace treaty will come into place after that, we think is the next event, this 7-year treaty. And now the way is open for the construction of the third temple. All of this fits together exactly. And here's what's really interesting. This is fascinating. You know what Ezekiel 40, 41, 42 tell us? It's the blueprint on how to build the third temple. It follows exactly after the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39. God says, now I want you to build the third temple. So in Matthew 24, we've learned some tremendous things about the future that Jesus himself pointed us to. Number one, the sign of the end, the real sign of the end, that I'm coming soon, be looking for a 7-year peace treaty. Number two, the he involved. Jesus says this will be the Antichrist. He will be on earth, and now he will be active in the public nature. And apparently he will be, I don't know, probably he's charismatic, he's recruiting people, who knows what he's doing. Now he's active and he's here. And the third one is the temple. We'll have either the temple completed or under construction, because it's a prominent part of Daniel 9:27. So those are the conditions. Jesus said, until you see those conditions, I'm not coming back. But once you do see them, here's the key. The day that that treaty is finalized and the 7-year period starts, that means the clock is ticking for the end of life as we know it on planet Earth. No exaggeration. Jesus says it himself. All right. So in the next video, let's talk about this third temple and why it's so important and what its meaning is and why having it marks the end of life as we know it and the soon return of Jesus. I'll see you there.